Welcome back to Setting the Scene. I'm your host David, and in today's video we're going to do something a little bit different. We're still going to set a scene, but we're going to try and replicate a scene which I saw in a White Dwarf magazine years and years and years ago, probably when I was about 9 years old. So the image that I want to recreate, I've tried to find it on the internet and I can't find it, so I know that's not very helpful. But essentially it was from Space Marine, when that was all epic, and it was kind of a hilly thing with a backdrop, and on the front I think it was a rhino and some marines in the front, and then there was some titans. I think they were the warlords, with the beetleback shaped warlords, with a load of land raiders and marines and stuff and whatever else kind of moving through the front of the screen. Now, because I'm a Mechanicum player, of course, I'm going to use Mechanicum instead of the Space Marines in the foreground. I'm going to use the Malanax, House Malanax, and Legio Mortis for the Titan Legion walking through. I'm going to create some little detail on the sides, and I've got a backdrop which I'll show you about that in a second. Now, I'm going to put a big disclaimer right at the beginning of this video. I am not a professional photographer. Let's just put it out there right now. I've got a digital camera. I'm not afraid to use it. So I just want to show you guys that starting a channel, doing battle reports, or taking good photos, not that I'm good at taking photos, is actually a lot easier than people perhaps think it is, or it's not. Other people think it might be quite hard. You need a lot of this and a lot of that, but really, you just need a bit of imagination, and thankfully I've got loads of imagination, which is good. So I just want to show you just how super easy it is to take what I think is a cool photo. Now, you can be the judge of that, and I would love to hear your comments in the bottom below. But also, I just want to show you as well what goes on at the channel, because I don't think I do that very well. I do like setting the scene, I do board builds and stuff, but you never really get the background video to what's going on. And when I finally move to New Zealand, hopefully, if it ever happens, there will be a lot more behind the scenes. I'll show you the studio. I've got to rebuild the entire booth, the entire studio, all the new pieces of equipment. We're setting up a business for my partner, which I mentioned in the previous video, or the Christmas video, I think. And a lot of that equipment will be used on the channel as well. So I'll show you all that setup, and I'm going to do sort of a video that like a transitioning video from kind of England to New Zealand, just kind of show you the whole picture really. Anyway, so I've practiced this and it kind of works. I think the bit where it falls down is right at the very end. My photography skill and blending a couple of pictures and images together isn't amazing, but I think for a complete amateur, which is kind of where I am at this, I think it's a really good result. And I think that you can achieve this at home. If, like me, you've got little to no skill at taking photos, or kind of, like, I can't use Photoshop, for example. I can use it in a very, very basic, minor way, but I'm no good at it. And a lot of people out there are a lot better at Photoshop than I am, and they do a bit of work for me when I can't do the things that I want to do. So I am learning, but my workload is so massive, and with moving to New Zealand and everything, there's a lot going on. So I don't really have a lot of time to sit down and think, right, I'm going to learn this particular part of Photoshop and whatever else. However, I can use Final Cut fairly well, which is what I use to edit all the videos, and I can manipulate the bits within the program to get the result that I want, which is what I tend to do when I edit the videos. Anyway, I really want to do this scene, but it takes a ton of elements, not very expensive elements, but a ton of elements to get it all kind of set up, ready to go. So, how am I going to explain this? It's really complicated. So first things first, I've got all the usual bits you'll need to create a scene. I've got some slate, I've got some aquarium rock, it's kind of a red colour. I've got some reddish sand which goes well with the whole theme. Just below my feet I've got I'll show you, I've got a makeshift green screen, and it's just a piece of material which I ordered when I started the channel nearly 4 years ago. I think it was 80 quid, and I got black, white, green, a couple of poles to hold it up and stuff. But for this, I'm just going to get my girlfriend, well, she's out at the moment, but when she gets home, she doesn't know, I'm going to get her to hold this up to create a green screen for me. And then I'm going to overlay an image at the back to give a nice backdrop, so it won't just be a black background like I do in the past. So and all I've done is I've just staple gunned a couple of bits of wood, so when it's held up, it's taut and there's no creasing on there, so that's really cool. I've got a grey box to create the foreground landscape, which I'll show you in a second. I've got these aquarium backdrops, so multiple of them fit together and they create a nice rocky background for an aquarium. I usually lay them flat and put some salt or sand or whatever over the top just to give a nice kind of rocky outcrop. It works amazingly well, really happy with them. And then I've got a couple of sections around my battle board which I'll use to create kind of the main battlescape, I guess, or landscape rather. And then I've got a couple of extra Titanicus buildings, because I found in my test photos that when you've got like the line of the Realm of Battle board here and then the backdrop, it's quite harsh, it's quite stark. So if we break it up with some rocks, some sand and some of these buildings here, it'll just blur the line a little bit better as well. So I did learn a few things from doing this. I spent about 3 hours on it this morning, so there we go. And then I've got a Trios armoured conveyor and a few Thalax, and they are going to be in the foreground of my shot, looking over a ledge. They're going to be a ledge rather, looking over the valley where this Legion, the Legio and the House Manalax are kind of marching towards their destination, which would be cool. I've also set up a second camera off to my left that kind of shows the entire booth and the whole workspace that I'm working on, because there's quite a lot going on and you won't be able to capture it all from this camera. So I'll switch between camera angles. Then once I've done that, I'll get my girlfriend here. She'll hold the screen up. I'll take a few photos and then I'll go to my computer and I'll show you the process in Final Cut about how I achieved those bits and bobs. So it's really easy. It might be a really long video and I will try and skip through a lot of it as much as I can, because you don't want me wheeling around my mouth, clicking on that, clicking on that. I'll just do kind of like a big overview, and then at the end I'll show you a load of photos. So hopefully that makes sense. Please stay with me. You know, if you've got this on in the background painting, that's perfect. So first things first, we need to just clear some space, because we want to put the Realm of Battle tiles down, and this is essentially the foundation for everything, and that will frame the whole shot. My camera, when I take the photo, is going to be off at an angle, but I'm only photographing kind of this section here. So a lot of this will be wasted, so I'm not too worried about here, but I might dress some of it, but it just depends on the camera really. And I'll just get these out of the way. And we've got a couple of tiles here. Beautiful. Now obviously there's going to be a big line down the front of these, but we're not too worried about that because we can cover that up. I think, no, I'll keep it like that, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. So there's my major scene, my landscape rather. So as I said before, we need to break up this very harsh line here. And also the background which I've chosen, it's quite choppy, it's got a big sun and loads of kind of mountainous terrain and things like that. So it will work. Hopefully. It says with confidence it will work. So I'm just breaking up the skyline a little bit. And also as well, you have to remember, when I take this photo, the thing that will be in focus are the Thalax and Triaros. It won't be the Maniple and the background. So the background will be quite vivid, but the Maniple and stuff up front, in the middle rather, they will be quite blurred out. So it does do us a bit of a favour really. And then we're just going to have a hint of just a very basic scene here, nothing crazy or complicated. We just want to get a flavour for what's going on. Well, that's not as good as I thought it might have been. Okay, that'll be right, I think. Bunker. I think 2's enough, that's okay. And again, we'll just scatter a few little rocks around here, looking for the smaller ones as much as possible. Good. I think that'll do it. I told you it was easy. It was super, super simple. And we're going to pop these guys here. When I took the photos earlier, I put the maniple in loads of different configurations. So, you know, I've done like warlord in the middle and some stuff around it, but it makes sense, I think, the warlord at the back, and then we go down in scale right to the little knights at the front. I kind of like that. It worked really well. It gave a bit of movement and direction into the photo, which I kind of liked. So you got the warhounds just scouting out the front there. I've got the Sarasta chassis in here, but I'm not going to use them, I don't think. I'm just going to use these little knights out the front. You know, we're not too worried where they are because, you know, everything will be spaced out. We can crop whatever we need. And then, of course, the other thing is we want to try and get rid of the bases as much as possible. So what I'm going to do... I should also mention that the Titan Maniple is painted by Dan Wheeler at 1K Sun. You probably remember him for his amazing Space Wolves. That was Pete. 1,000 Suns, and he featured on a series of games with Pete. God, about 2-3 years ago now, a long time ago. But that was a really great series of games, and I've been really lucky that Dan has painted this Legion for me, or Legio rather. I know it looks terrible. It will look better, I promise. That'll be fine. I need a little pot. So we're just trying to create a little bit of rocky ground. And then, if I can just blend. Now, we don't need to worry too much. I just want to get rid of the major... I just want to get rid of the major lines of the bases because they really stand out in the photos. And also as well, I want to be more biased towards this side rather than this side because you won't see it. And it'll be blurred as well, so we don't need to be too crazy with what we do here. The less sand, the better for me, because it takes a nightmare to clear up. I had an amazing morning today. I've spent at least a couple of hours just tidying everything up on the channel. It was such a mess. And if you saw the photos from the previous video, I sort of did a couple of photos about working in chaos, and it does help, but even I went, whew, that's a bit keen. So we had a good tidy up today, which was nice. Again, we're not too worried about this. It's all going to be blurred. I'm going to try and hide these bases a little bit. Also, it just makes the ground a little bit more interesting. You know, it's not just a flat surface. And we want to try and hide that line between the two realm of battles. We want to disguise these rocks. We don't want them to be too prevalent, sticking out too much. We don't want those knights tripping over them, do we? Yeah, that looks all right. Just hide that. We're getting there. Yeah, that looks cool. That looks really cool. Just going to hide this line because I could see the line in the previous videos and it looks terrible. There we go. Let's cover that up. We'll have a little bit on here. Great. I am fairly happy with that. I might just put a bit more on here. God's going over the floor. Okay, that's that. Next, we're going to switch to the camera. I'm going to build the foreground now as well. So it'll be 2 seconds. All right, so we're going to use this big box to simulate a really big ledge, and we want this quite far forward because we want the shot to come over at this angle and go down at the knight's there, and we want to just clip. We want to clip the warlord ever so slightly. So just take a little bit of jiggering around, and I need the old Triaros to balance it out. And I kind of like the idea that the maniple and the knights are advancing forward in the gully, and they're supported by Mechanicum on the periphery, just kind of keeping an eye on them, making sure everything's okay. So we're going to do the same thing. Now I know you're going to say to me, well, the rocks on here are a little bit different colour. Yeah, it's grey, but it's mirroring the grey on the ledges over there on the other side of the board, which is good. Bit of sand. And don't forget as well, when we get it into Final Cut, we are going to play with the settings of the colours and stuff. So it will match. I know at the moment it looks quite mismatched, but it will be better. Put a little bit on the tracks, because it would be really dusty. I'm only doing the first sort of quarter of this tank. I don't know if you can see that particularly well in this camera, but I'll overlay a photo of what it looks like. We really want to disguise these bases now because they will be majority in shot. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can see all that. I say I'll get a photo. A little bit more here. All right. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to have a little tidy up, and then I'm going to get the digital camera out and I'll move the other camera so you can get an idea about what we're looking at. Right, that's kind of what I've gone with. You can see that I added another board here and just made it in the same way. So another round battle tile, exactly the same way. And I moved the little petrochemical works here. I moved it from this side because you couldn't see any of this. So it was a bit of a waste of time. So we've got the warlord here, which we can see. It kind of intersects with the Triaros, which looks a bit odd. So I'm going to try and just perhaps move it a tiny bit, just go back and see what that looks like. And it's just a process of going backwards and forwards just to see what looks good. But you know, when you do that, you just got to be mindful that when you put it into your editing software, whether that's Photoshop or whatever program you use, you be able to play with all the different bits and bobs. So I'm just going to spend, I don't know, half hour just tweaking everything, making sure all the bases are obscured and it all looks the way I want it to look. Right, I've taken a couple of photos with the camera and had a quick look. So the more you angle the camera behind the models in the foreground, the more or less you get to see of the Titan Maniple. Now, and the knights, they are really heavily obscured, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. So we want this really nice big background here with the sun on it and the mountain ranges obscured. Titan Maniple here, and then the stuff in the foreground. So I've literally just got like the front of the Triaros with the Thalax in the front, and I'll put those photos up now. Obviously the background's still in the way, but my girlfriend is taking the dog to the vets, so I've got to wait for her to come home, and then I can get her to hold my fancy screen up, and then I can take you downstairs and do all the post-production stuff. So I'll sit tight, time for a cup of tea. I thought I'd do a quick walkthrough just to give you an idea about what we're looking at. But I mean, even on its own like this, that still looks really good. And you can take some great photos of that. You could obscure the bases a lot more, but that would still be a great photo to take. If I do a shot here, you can kind of see what I'm looking at. So you've got the petrochemical works there, the Maniple, the knights, and then on that box you've got that backdrop for an aquarium, the lights, and then the Thalax and the Triaros on top. And if I come back, you can just see everything. So it does look a bit weird, but when you line it all up, it does work. Now on to the next part. What I've done is I've selected 2 backgrounds from Shutterstock, which I really like. And I think I'm going to go with this bluey one. I know the red one would make sense because, you know, we've got a deserty background, but we can change the colours and various bits and bobs, or at least my limited understanding about how to change colours and bits and bobs. So that's the one I've gone for. We'll load up Final Cut now, which you've got here. And you can see there's a ton of photos I took. These were some of the first test photos I took there without the sand on the foreground there. And then from here on, these are the ones I took. So lots of different angles. And right at the very end is the one I selected. And the one I selected was one that had loads of background. So we can get the you know, the rocks and the suns and stuff in the background. So we've got the Thalax here and a little flavour of the Trias armoured conveyor. And then we've got the Knights and the Titans in the back, and then we've got these the bunkers and the silos here. Again, just to break up that skyline, and we're not too worried about this skyline here on the left-hand side. So that's the one I've gone for. I've already added the Kia, and it's literally just drag and drop. So if I turn the Kia back on, it'll blank out the background, which is super easy, and that's why we use a green screen. You can use a blue screen or a green screen, doesn't really matter. And then we'll select our backdrop and we'll drop it underneath because it's our backdrop. If you stick it on top, it will obscure the picture you've got there. So it has to go behind, and the Kia sits in between, and that's what gives you that effect. What I am going to do though, I want a little bit more sky in the photo and less in the foreground. So I'm just going to go into here and drop my picture down a little bit, which is pretty good. Quite happy with that. And I'm gonna increase the height of the sky there because I want some of the mountains in the background there. The problem we've got here is this right angle here, so we'll have to go back and just adjust the adjust this. Oh, wrong way. What I might do is I might enlarge it a little bit. Now again, my skills on Final Cut aren't amazing, but they are getting there. I think that helps. Looks pretty terrible right now because, you know, there's bits and bobs all over the shop, but we're going to try and change that if we can. It's going to play with the sky a little bit, and it's just trial and error. You know, I'm not professional at this. You know, it's not something I do every day, but I just figured in the future there'll be some great opportunity to do more things like this. And I think, you know, the more I can practice now and show you guys how easy it is. Well, I say easy, it's not easy, but it's just getting practice in, isn't it? So I'm quite happy with that, really. What I am going to do now is I'm going to try and change the hue of the background to at least match the colour of the foreground. So we want it a little bit yellowy, which that kind of works. See if we can play with it a bit more. Yeah, I mean, it kind of works. It's a bit green there. Now, I'm sure there might be a little button that I can push and that'll make the background change to the same colour as the foreground. But again, you know, my limited experience of this is not amazing. I don't tend to do this in any of the battle reports I produce. So I think that looks quite good for now. What we might do is we might just try and dull down the picture of the Mechanicum and the Knights there a little bit. Yeah, and there's lots of effects that we can play with in Final Cut. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little mask around it. Will that work? Oh, wrong one. That is not what I want. I'm fairly happy with how We've got the Thalax and the Knights and the Titans in the background and everything else. So I'm going to put these two together now as a compound clip, and that'll just allow them to be manipulated together to make life a lot easier. So we want this little effect here, and this you'll probably see this on Instagram quite a lot, where it kind of fades the edges in and out. So let's have a quick look at making it a bit darker on the edges, kind of close the photo in a little bit. Here we go, this is what we want. We don't want to go too crazy. I quite like that. That is centered. So I think they're quite pleased. So have a quick look full screen. Yeah, that looks all right to me. Not 100% sure what that flappy line does. Who knows? But it won't go away. I can tell you that much. All right. By the looks of it, it's just a quick and easy way of drawing the edges in a little bit. So well, that's good enough for me. And what we're going to do now is we're going to try and just use some of the effects that come with this program. So there's a dry heat one. We are technically, I guess, in the desert, aren't we? So let's have a look for that. We'll have a quick search. Dry heat. Here we go. So if I hover over that, it will kind of put the colours in, and that one's heat. And that's a bit intense. Heat wave. Ooh, I do actually quite like that, but I think it's a bit dark. That does take a lot of the colour away, unfortunately. Yeah, I probably won't use any of those actually. I think that looks quite good. What I'm doing here, I'm not quite happy with the harshness of the edges there, so I'm just playing around with the settings a little bit more, just to make that kind of that mask a bit more gradual than what it was. I think it was a bit harsh. I think that's a little better. You can see it's quite prominent there actually. We don't want that. We want it to be a little bit more subtler than that. So let's go back in and see if we can just widen that a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit more gradual. You can still see it though. See if I can do something about that. Yeah, that's a little better. That's a lot more subtle. The next thing I'm going to try and do, I'm just going to try and unify all of the colours together if I can. So we're just going to play with sort of the saturation and the exposure. So, you know, we can go right full on black and white, right through to real high colour. But let's have a quick look. And it's just playing around with the settings to see what you like. A little bit more darker can be a bit more forgiving. And this is, I think, just a matter of taste, isn't it? We can get some real wild. I don't think we want to mess around with it too much, actually. We'll just see if there's any more effects which we quite like the look of. Well, that's aged film. It's not very good for a photo. Our classic aged paper. I do like the look of that actually, but there you go. No, too bright. Artifacts. Well, that's quite good, but it won't really work for a photo. Be good on a movie reel, I think. Ash, no. I just want something that just kind of blurs the lines a little bit. What we got? Cartoon. Sensor's no good. Cold Steel. Sounds like a comic book character. Combat. Let's see what that does. Oh, that's not too bad. Kind of takes the colour out of it a little bit. Cool, crisp, crosshatch. Desert glare, that sounds good, doesn't it? Oh yeah, I do quite like that actually. Let's have a look. Toss it between the two, if I'm honest. I still think these lines along here are a little bit harsher. what I might do, let's have a quick look to see if we can just crop this photo in a little bit. Yeah, I think that's all right. It kind of places the Titan maniple right in the center, although you don't get any of the suns in the background, which I quite liked. Do you know what? I think we're going to go back to how we had it. I think it looked quite good. Just Control Z all of this to get back to the point where we were happy. There we go, we're back. Let's have a quick look at this on full screen. I mean, as a first attempt, I think it's all right. I don't think it's perfect, but you can see the suggestion of the maniple and the knights walking through the valley. You've got a little bit of those buildings on the right breaking up the skyline a little bit, and then you've got the Thallax on the outside with Triaros. Now, as I said, I'm not a professional at this. I'm sure there are some guys out there that can do it a lot better than I can, but I think from a first attempt, it's pretty good. And I think as well, you know, you've got plenty of time on your hands now, and you can just give it a try and learn new skills. And that is essentially how I started the channel. I said to myself, you know, I want to do this. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to buy a computer, get some programs, and have a go. And that's exactly how I started. I have no doubt that in the future this will get a lot better. But I think as a first attempt, I'm really, really pleased with it. The last thing to do, of course, is to add the logo on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. I get that it covers up the Triaros a bit, so what we might do is we might just shrink it ever so slightly. Oh, wrong way. There we go. We'll just put that into position. It's good to have a watermark on the photo at least somewhere. There it is, that's the photo done. I think it's really nice to have something to show for my work. I think I've spent in total about 8-9 hours today on the whole thing, from building the board, trying the photo out before I started filming, and then obviously going through that with you now. There's definitely some improvements to be made, but I think considering my limited experience with photography, I'm really happy with it. There is no doubt there is room for improvement, and there is no doubt that there's people out there watching this that you know how to do it 10 times better than me. I totally get that. But all I tried to achieve from this video was to show that, you know, if you don't know how to do something, the best thing to do is just to give it a try. Okay, you might fail, sure, but it's the only way you'll learn. And I think we see that in our community so often. You know, people come on Facebook, oh, I have not painted Space Marine before, any tips? And before you know it, because the community is so friendly, you've got 100 answers, and I don't think that's very helpful. I think the best thing you could do if you're trying something for the first time is just to get what you think you need, maybe seek some advice, but then just go and do it. Give it a try, and then have a look at your results at the end and weigh them up. You know, that one's good, that one's not so good, that's good about that, that's not good about that. And then buy some more Space Marines or buy some more models or whatever, and just keep practicing and practicing, because I think that's the only way you'll get better. You know, and that extends into our lives, and there's lots of things that can be applied to, sure. So photo-wise, I need more experience with the camera. Perhaps I'll get Boris to show me some tips, because he's quite a whiz with all that sort of stuff. But I think as a first attempt, not a bad result. I'd love to hear your feedback, good or bad. You know, maybe you're a photographer, or maybe you're excellent at Photoshop and you could offer me some tips or whatever. That would be great. But I am going to give this a try a little bit more. The other way I could have done it was I could have taken a photo separately with the Triaros and the Thallax, and then put the green screen behind that, cut that out, took the photo of this, and then layered the two up and moved them in and out, zoom in, zoom out. This would have been a lot more in focus, and I could have blurred it out a little bit more. And I might try that over the weekend. So I've got a bit of free time this weekend, so I might try that. And if I get a better picture, I'll post it up. I really hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Next week, who knows what we'll do next week. We'll do a 30k setting the scene, I'm sure, with some Imperial fists, I'd imagine. But thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.